What if the entire Earth was nothing but water? No continents, no mountains, no deserts, just an endless ocean stretching in every direction. At first it might sound like paradise, but let's dive deeper. With no land, there would be no cities, no roads, no farmland. Humanity as we know it couldn't survive. Even if people lived on floating platforms, they'd struggle to grow food without soil. Most animals and plants that depend on land would go extinct. But what about the climate? The Earth's weather depends on the interaction between land and sea. Without continents, winds and ocean currents would change completely. Massive storms, far stronger than today's hurricanes, would sweep endlessly around the planet with nothing to stop them. And then there's gravity. The Earth would reshape itself into what's called an ocean world. A perfect water-covered sphere with depth stretching hundreds of kilometers. At the bottom, under extreme pressure, water would actually turn into exotic forms of ice that don't exist on the surface. Life, however, might still find a way. In the deep oceans, hydrothermal vents could host strange ecosystems, just like they do today at the bottom of the sea. Entire alien-like food chains could thrive without sunlight, living off the heat and chemicals from beneath the ocean floor. But for us, things would be bleak. Without land, civilization couldn't exist. No buildings, no technology, no agriculture. Only endless water, storms, and the faint chance of survival on floating structures. So while a water-world Earth sounds like science fiction, in reality, it would be more like a survival nightmare. What if Earth spun faster? Let's say Earth suddenly started spinning faster. Not a lot faster at first, just enough that you notice something strange at the gym. You step on the scale and congratulations, you've lost a few pounds. Unfortunately, it's not because you've been working out. The ground beneath you is trying to fling you into space. At the equator, Earth already moves at about 470 meters per second. Double that, and you'd feel 10% lighter. Not bad, right? Like permanent low-gravity mode. Triple it, and now buildings are struggling to stay put. Rivers start drifting sideways. Oceans creep toward the equator, drowning coastlines. Florida, more underwater than usual. But let's get ambitious. If Earth spun fast enough, gravity at the equator would cancel out. You could jump and just keep going. Which sounds fun until you realize the atmosphere doesn't want to hang around either. The air would be flung outward, peeling away like, with no atmosphere, say goodbye to breathing, weather, and most life. On the plus side, hurricanes would stop. On the minus side, so would literally everything else. And remember, the moon is still up there. Right now, it's slowly drifting away because Earth's spin tugs on it. If Earth spun faster, the effect would be even stronger. The moon would retreat faster and faster, which sounds cool until you realize the tides would go berserk. Imagine a beach where high tide is less water lapping at your ankles and more ocean suddenly rearranging the furniture in your house. Eventually, if Earth spins far too quickly, the crust itself can't hold together. The planet bulges outward at the equator, cracks open, and becomes more like Saturn's rings than a planet. Congrats, you turned Earth into a cosmic fidget spinner. So yes, if Earth spun faster, you'd lose a little weight. But soon after, you'd lose your house, your air, the moon, and eventually the planet itself. Nice job. What if Earth had no gravity? From the very first moment, everything would change. Gravity is what keeps us on the ground, holds the atmosphere around us, and keeps the oceans in place. Without it, nothing would stay. First, humans. The second gravity disappears, we would all start floating upward. Not just us, chairs, cars, buildings, everything would drift away. Even the oceans would rise, spilling into space as massive waves of water. The atmosphere itself wouldn't last. The air we breathe would escape into space. Within minutes, we'd be gasping, with no oxygen and no shield against the sun's deadly radiation. The moon wouldn't stay either. Earth's gravity is what keeps it in orbit. Without it, the moon would drift off into deep space, and with it, the tides, completely gone forever. But here's the real nightmare. Earth itself would start falling apart. Gravity isn't just what holds us down, it's the force that binds the crust, the oceans, and every atom of this planet together. Without it, Earth would slowly break apart, crumbling into cosmic dust. In short, gravity isn't just what keeps your feet on the ground, it's the glue of our world. Without it, there's no us and no Earth. What if the wind just stopped blowing? At first, you might think this sounds peaceful. No storms, no hurricanes, no annoying gusts messing up your hair. But wind isn't just an inconvenience, it's one of the engines of life on Earth. Without wind, weather as we know it would collapse. The atmosphere would become still and stagnant. Rain clouds wouldn't move inland, huge regions would dry up, while others would flood endlessly. Plants would struggle too. Wind carries pollen and seeds across distances. Without it, many ecosystems would fail to reproduce, leading to mass extinctions over time. And then there's the oceans. Wind powers currents like the Gulf Stream, which regulate Earth's climate. Without wind, those currents would slow, temperatures would become extreme, and some coasts could freeze while others overheat. Even the air we breathe would suffer. Without circulation, pollution would hang over cities permanently, creating toxic bubbles of smog. It might seem calm at first, but without the wind, our planet's systems, weather, oceans, ecosystems, even breathable air, would break down. The wind isn't just a breeze, it's the breath of the Earth itself. What if the internet just stopped working? At first, it might feel like a minor annoyance. No social media, no YouTube, no online games. But the internet isn't just entertainment, it's the nervous system of our modern civilization. Within the first few minutes, global communication would collapse. Billions of messages, video calls, and GPS systems would fail. Airplanes in the sky depend on constant data. Shipping routes use satellites linked to the web. Without it, pilots and captains would be left navigating blind. Emergency services would struggle too. Ambulances, police, and fire departments rely on real-time digital networks. Without them, response times would slow, and chaos would rise. Then, the economy would freeze. Banks, stock markets, and online payments all depend on internet connections. ATMs wouldn't work, credit card transactions would fail. Within hours, shops and businesses around the world would be paralyzed. By the end of the first day, entire industries would collapse. Factories that depend on automated systems would grind to a halt. Hospitals would lose access to online medical records and even some life support systems. Even food supply chains, which rely on tracking and digital logistics, would start breaking down. And let's not forget everyday life. Without the internet, people couldn't work from home, students couldn't attend online classes, and millions would suddenly lose their jobs. Social media, news, and communication would vanish overnight. Within a week, panic would spread worldwide. Stock markets would crash. Governments would scramble to create local networks and backups. But the damage would already be massive. Cities that rely on internet-controlled power grids and water supplies would experience outages, leaving millions vulnerable. But humanity wouldn't end. For thousands of years, people lived without the internet. In time, radio, local intranets, and old-fashioned communication would return. Trade would adapt, communities would reorganize, and people would find new ways to connect. Life would continue, but not the same. The modern world, with instant information and global connection, would vanish in a moment. The internet isn't just a tool, it's the invisible thread holding civilization together. And if it ever broke, our world would unravel with it. What if all animals suddenly disappeared from Earth? At first, it might sound strange, and some people may think life would continue as usual. But in reality, the disappearance of animals would trigger a planetary catastrophe. The first and most immediate problem would be pollination. Most of the plants we rely on for food depend on insects, especially bees and butterflies, to transfer pollen. Without them, crops would stop producing gradually. Within just a few months, fruits, vegetables, and grains would begin to vanish from markets, and global food supplies would shrink dramatically. Next, the soil itself would collapse. Tiny creatures like worms and insects recycle nutrients in the ground. Without them, soil would become dead and infertile, unable to support agriculture. Farms would fail, and forests would wither since no animals would be left to spread seeds. In the oceans, the situation would be just as bad. Fish and marine animals regulate ecosystems in the sea. Without them, algae would grow uncontrollably, consuming oxygen and turning oceans into dead zones with no coral reefs or marine life. For humans, the consequences would be devastating. Livestock and domestic animals like cows, chickens, and goats provide much of the world's meat, milk, and eggs. Their disappearance would erase a huge portion of the human diet and drive billions into starvation. Soon, the collapse of agriculture and food chains would create global chaos. Wars over resources, economic breakdown, and widespread famine. Within only a few generations, humanity itself could face extinction. If animals vanished, it wouldn't just be a loss of biodiversity. It would mean the total collapse of life on Earth as we know it.